The mission of the Blue Angels now is to inspire. It's simple. It's not about air shows, it's not about blue airplanes, it's not even about the Navy. It's truly about showing that if a group of people are really dedicated and they want to excel, they can do it.
Flying Blue Angel number 6, the opposing solo from Savannah, Georgia, Lieutenant David Anderson. The pilots and crew.
I guess my parents tell me I first started talking about wanting to learn how to fly when I was about 7 years old. And then through college, just continued to think I was going to do that. And I had a friend go see a Navy and Marine Corps recruiter, and I went with him, and history after that. Back then, we got a lot more hours on our first deployment. So I had just come in, I'd done my first 3 years at sea duty, and then came back and I was in my first shore duty billet, and that was about the right rotation for having the number of hours and the time in. So I was in 1983 when I applied the first time, and I was commissioned in 1977. And then, like I say, that was about the norm. Did not get picked up my first time, was talked by a good friend who was on the team to reapply. I did. Got picked up the second time in 84, and I flew with them 85, 86, 87. In my first year, I was a narrator, so I came in and had 3-year orders. If you start out your first year as the narrator, you fly the 2-seat version. You and 8 usually go early to the show sites, and then you'll fly 3 members of the media, maybe additional flights for any celebrities or VIPs we may be flying. One of our former Blue Angels who was on the team in 60, a guy named Duke Vinson. He was Aaron Spelling's right-hand man. So Duke was opening the door for us to fly a lot of celebrities and VIPs that in turn were giving us a lot of national media. And so he was approached at the time about making a movie, a short, kind of a documentary, and he approached Christopher Reeve about coming and with the whole storyline of how he was presenting it. And I was 7 at the time, so it clearly fell to me to have to be the person on the ground to interact with him.
Good morning. Dave Anderson.
Reeve. Nice to meet you,
Chris.
So this is it, huh?
Yeah, this is it. You ready?
He wanted to understand what the expectations were for him, and we wanted to understand what his expectations were for us. So we met him and we did a number of shoots. He flew with me in the back seat, and he was wonderful to work with. He was sincere about it wanting to be about the Blue Angels, not be about Christopher Reeves. And so it was a pleasure to get to know him and work with him. Having done a year as 7, I requested to go into the solo program, and they allowed me to do so. And so I went from being 7 to 6, and then as we made the transition, I went to 5. The thing that was a real anomaly at the time, as you know, we had a fatality in 1985, and we actually had to, number 6 was killed in a midair up in Niagara Falls, Mike Gershon. Ironically enough, the individual who had encouraged me to come back and apply the second time after I didn't get selected my first application year. So Mike had encouraged me to come back. Well, after the fatality, we actually didn't have anybody we could call back, so we finished that year with just 5 airplanes. And as we finished up, we really, because of rotation and career progression and a number of other things, our lead solo had to leave the team, and we were without a lead solo. Well, Kurt Watson, who was on the team as the slot pilot, he had had a lot of time in the A4. He had already been on the team now for 3 years. He had been 7 like I was, and then he had been the left wingman number 3, and then he had gone to number 4 as the slot pilot, and he was due to leave the team. Well, we approached him, collectively the team did, we approached him about, Kurt, would you stay and do a super saturated training program for 2 months and learn to be the lead solo and stay for another year? And that's what we did. So he spent November and December out in the desert learning all the solo maneuvers. Obviously he already knew formation, he knew everything about Blue Angels, having been in 3 positions before. And he moved in as the lead solo, and I came in as his opposing solo. And we say we were the blind leading the blind that year, but we just had a wonderful relationship. He was a great instructor, he was a great mentor.
Ladies and gentlemen, Flying Blue Angel number 1, the commanding officer and flight leader of the Blue Angels from Portland, North Dakota, Commander Gil Rude.
Gil Rude came on, just a fantastic individual, a great leader, a great pilot. He was the right guy at the right time. And so when Gil came on, the whole team just clicked. That was my best year on the team. I was opposing solo, so all I had to do was shut up and fly airplanes. Kurt and I were just having a great time, great boss, and it was a lot of fun.
Today marks the end of an era. The final of the Blue Angels flying the McDonnell Douglas A4 Skyhawk II.
It was the 75th anniversary of naval aviation and the 40th anniversary of the Blue Angels, and the last show in the A4. So all of that came to this just beautiful crescendo, if you would, at the end of the 1986 season, that you felt like you were part of something special. And it was one of the few times in life, you usually don't appreciate things until they're over, and you look back and you go, wow, I can't believe I did that. This is one of those occasions that when you're in the middle of it, we kind of had a sense that this was something that was really special. Felt like we were blessed to be part of it.
From the left, the Blue Angels, 1986.
We taxi in the A4s, and our new number 7 who had just come on board, who was checked out in the F-18, we had our first F-18 painted and at the Squadron. So at the end of the show, Cliff taxis the F-18 out, and we've got the A4 and the F-18, the old and the new, beak to beak. So we knew the onus was on us that next year, everybody who cares anything about the Blue Angels, we're expecting to see a Blue Angel air show in the F-18. And it was up to us to make that a reality. We knew we were not going to be able to show the airplane off for its true capabilities. That was not our mission. Our mission was to transition to the new airplane flying the same Blue Angel air show. And we were going to leave it to all the guys who came behind us who were more comfortable in the airplane and had the time to explore the envelope and see what they could do with the plane and the Blue Angel maneuvers. But that was not our job. And so we froze the diamond. So Gil is the new boss, and then a very experienced right wingman in Mark Bircher, and a very experienced slot pilot in Pat Walsh, and then our other newbie who had come on, Donnie Cochran. We froze the diamond, and then I moved up to 5, and we brought Leroy into number 6. None of us had flown the F-18 in the fleet. Leroy brought to the solo program, to me personally, to the challenges we were facing, just the enthusiasm and the professionalism that he was there to learn. He was going to be the best wingman that I could possibly have, and this deep sense that he's going to help me get through this. Leroy was just, I cannot imagine a better person to have had as my opposing solo that year. And what makes it even more rewarding to say this, initially, I told the boss I didn't want Leroy as my opposing solo. I wanted someone who had F-18 experience. And everything said and done, I wouldn't have changed a thing. I was better served having the man, Wayne Molnar, than I could have been having the most experienced fleet F-18 pilot out there. Yeah, I owe Leroy a lot. We left for winter training, and we had a lot of limitations going in. There were several maneuvers that immediately we knew the F-18 was not going to be able to do the way the A4 would, primarily within the solo program. It had to do with how long we could stay inverted. It had to do with the fact we didn't have as much negative G capability in the F-18. It had to do with a lot of the flight clearances that we did not have because no one had ever tried to fly the plane that way, and they weren't sure what was going to happen. I, in hindsight, probably put more pressure on myself than I should have, in that I felt I had the onus to have the solo program to be at Blue Angel standards in this new airplane, discounting the fact that I had never flown it, and that my opposing solo, who had not only not flown the F-18, he'd never flown Blue Angel Air Show before. So with all of that self-imposed stress, if you would, we started winter training. We slowly started getting some flight clearances in. Some of the other ones that I really wanted for maneuvers, we weren't getting. They were saying, our test pilots can't do what you're asking us to do because they're not Blue Angel Air pilots. They're not Blue Angel pilots. And no, you can't do it because you're not a test pilot. I mean, it was the perfect catch-22. So I started doing some of my own test profiles, trying to understand what the plane was capable of. And the biggest thing is how to train the new opposing solo to get out of a poorly flown maneuver. We had a fuel pressure light in the cockpit, and it had served us well that regardless of what else is happening, because we did not have an inverted fuel pump, what else is happening, as long as if those lights come on, and within a second and a half, if you get positive G on the airplane, it'll be okay. I was doing one of the old maneuvers that we had dropped, the maneuver actually that we had the fatality on. It was a high degree of difficulty, but it was a phenomenal maneuver, and I actually had hoped to bring it back. So there was a combination of reasons I was using this particular maneuver. But anyway, so I get almost completely through the maneuver, and then those lights come on, and I get positive G on the airplane, thinking, okay, let's have everything's working like it's supposed to. Well, then shortly thereafter, both engines flame out. Well, as I learned later, the engines, where they're located in reference to where the fuel tanks are, at the altitude I was at and the airspeed, there was no way I was going to get a relight. So I wound up having to eject. I stayed with it much longer than I should have because I was pointed initially toward the base in El Centro and then the city, turned away, and then I was pointed at a little town of Brawley. Turned away from that. I'm still trying to get a relight, still trying to play with it. Well, finally all the hydraulics seized because the engines were spooling down. And once the hydraulics seized, you're just along for the ride, there's no control. So I was probably about, I don't know, 30 degrees nose down, and it rolled into about a 65-degree angle of bank coming through 2,600 feet when I finally ejected. And I got about 1.5 swing in the chute before I landed. Landed in the desert between El Centro and Brawley. So I got up and picked up my helmet and proceeded to walk about 1.5 miles out of the desert, and the base CO drove up in his car. He'd seen the crash, and he came and he actually picked me up and took me in to my dock at our dock West Robinson at the clinic. Boss, Sinatra, our chain of command, they knew that what I was doing after the fact, and today's standard I probably would have never flown again, but they said, no, we wish you hadn't done it, but we know what you were doing, press on. And so I flew in Pat Walsh's back seat the next day just to get back in the air, and 2 days later we were back in training, which today's standard that would never happen. The support and the leadership that I saw displayed at that point in my career had a huge inspiration on me. Again, seeing how Gil Rude handled this and how the 1-star we reported to down in Sinatra, how he handled this, and the support all the way up to the Pentagon. It had a huge impact on how I chose to view problems and lead throughout the rest of my career. The last season, it was finishing up, and so many people came out that year because they wanted to see the first year in the F-18. Every show site was different. I mean, the ones that stick out, and there's some show sites that just remember you clicked, you had an especially good relationship with the community on the ground. The people were just very receptive. Or there are other show sites that you look around while you're in the middle of flying and you go, I can't believe they're letting me do this. At the end of the season, it's a special time. I mean, it's a big event. You're finishing up a chapter of your life, particularly if you're leaving the team, as 3 of us were. Bigger than life, about a third of the way through the air show, I had an aircraft malfunction that drove me I couldn't continue the show. I had to land. Well, So I land and they got the spare ready, and of course the show's still going on. They don't stop. You just land and you switch airplanes and then you mesh yourself back into the show. Well, I got airplane swapped and come up and basically in the rush of everything, thinking through where the boss is and how I'm going to rejoin the formation, I wound up on the taxiway that put me back on the main runway right in front of the crowd. And because we take off an afterburner, it's very loud. And now, because of where I'm positioned, I can't see where the boss is. So I'm trying to talk to Red, who's on the comm cart. Red's narrating. I'm trying to talk to the doc and Mo on the comm cart. Say, and so they tell me the boss is coming. I know what maneuver he's on. So I'm almost thinking in the back of my mind, well, this is great. I know the maneuver. They're going up for the line abreast loop. Why don't I just take off, join them at the top of the line abreast loop? And of course, that was just, it's insane. You just don't do that. It would have broken every safety protocol we ever trained to. But I'm thinking, my last show, and I've got to do something for all the crowd and for all the X's that are back here. Well, fortunately, sanity prevailed, and I aborted that idea and just took off and rendezvoused with them behind the crowd. Having had to land and go through all of that, it was pretty much a downer. I just hated that we didn't have a perfect last air show. And I don't mind saying, because the troops had worked so hard maintaining the planes that year. It was nothing they did, it was no one's fault. It was just a failure of a system in the airplane. So my last show wasn't my favorite show, I guess is what all that leads up to. But one of the traditions is the only show that the Blue Angels do not debrief is their last show. So we never had a chance to actually sit down around the table and do the normal hour and a half, 2 hour debrief and watch the video of what it did and what you did and how did it go. We never had a chance to have to sit down and go through all of that. My takeaways for the year of '87, I guess because it started in such a stressful environment, it's the people. It's the people who, even the X's, the support from the community of guys who have come before us to let us realize that, we may think it's the end of the world, or we've got the weight of the world on our shoulders right now trying to make this, but other teams have had equally hard challenges. And just the feeling of that, it wasn't just us alone. No kidding, we pulled it off and made it in '87, but it wasn't just us who did it. It really was because of all those guys and teams who had come before us. And they gave us the feeling they were there for us. And that really is what has stuck with me over the years about being a part of this organization.